Now the idea of OxyLights, Occidental Chemical Corporation in Niagara Falls, New York, capital O, X, Y, capital L, IGHTS, OxyLights. It's Genesis. I was at the Moog plant working when Dave Luce was president. This is long after Bob had gone, and the company basically had sold off all the music inventory, and David pulled me up there with the idea that we'd start the music thing again, and but we were stuffing boards and doing all kinds of stuff to stay in business. One day the phone rang, and it was a guy from Niagara Falls, New York, Mike Tartaglia, and he says, "Well, we're looking for current somethings or da 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 da." I said, "Well, we don't design components. We stuff components into boards and build complete boards, Moog Electronics." And I said, "What are you doing?" Anyway, well, I'm the Festival of Lights coordinator for the city of Niagara Falls, New York. Big, big festival, goes on several months, dead of winter. Millions of people evidently come there. Uh, and I said, "Well, what are you trying to get done?" "Well, we think we've got the Occidental Chemical Company agreed to put up a picture on the side of their building." And the guy's Italian, so am I basically. My mother's Italian. And I know what I can get away with. So I just immediately said, "No, that's not what you want to do, Mike." And he laughs. He says, "Well, okay, Tom, what is it I really want to do?" I said, "Listen carefully, because we're going to make history." Now, where did I learn this stuff? From David Vancouvering. I said, "What you want, Michael, is not just a static picture on the side of the Occidental Chemical Building. You want the world's largest MIDI music and light show." He says, "What the heck is MIDI?" I said, "It's this protocol where we can make sounds and controlled sounds." It's very young. It was at that time. This is about 86, I think. And he says, "Well, okay, fine, if that's what I want. What do I do?" I said, "Well, I'll tell you what. Who's the guy at, or the person at Occidental that can say yes?" Where did I get that? Vancouver. Find the person that can say yes. Taught me much. Uh, oh, that's Michael Reichgut. Okay, I want to talk to him. When can you come up? I could be up there on Tuesday or whenever. That was my birthday, by the way. And that night I told Muriel, I said, "You know what? Something extraordinary is going to happen. I feel it, and I can track it." And that's what Vaco would say. You have to track those ideas and make them work. Then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I said, "Something extraordinary could happen." I said, "I think I can make it happen." So I went up there and I looked at the Occidental Chemical Building, and it was a very avant-garde building. It had a frame, of course, the inside, but then it had catwalks all the way around, glazing, glass, solar-assisted building, and you could stand on the 14th floor and look straight down through these catwalks. They're just metal grates, and they're all like enveloping this building. And then you had panels inside that could close and so forth. It immediately struck me because I thought, well, how in the world are you going to mount 1,500 lights on the side of a building? And it's got to be done in a couple of months. The festival's coming up. But I told him rather brashly, "Oh, no, we can do it." I had no idea how we could do it. But instantly I saw, oh, it's pretty easy. You hang the lights and strings on these grates. They become like elongated pixels, red, green, yellow, and blue. That's what we wound up doing. Theater marquee bulbs. It immediately was apparent to me, too. Well, they have to have a rise time that's pretty quick. I can't just have incandescent bulbs, and they wouldn't be bright enough. And like many, I think, good ideas, they come all at once. It's not like you have to grope. It's like you can see the entire plan and how it will work, and every piece and part just about is there. Well, so I talked to Michael Reichgut, and I told him, I said, "Yeah, this could be done. We could do this. How much would it cost?" Out of my hat, I pulled $80,000. No idea. I went back to the Moog plant. I sat down with Chuck White, as a matter of fact, was the first guy I talked to, an engineer and a musician. And I told him the idea, and I said, well, da, 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 da. He said, yeah, well, maybe so. Maybe that would work. At that point, Luce, who was president of the company, would have allowed me to do this as an outside gig, and bring it to the company to do the boards and so forth. His second in command didn't like that. It got rather convoluted politically. I had to wind up getting rewarded by writing the manual for OxyLights, which I did, and got paid something like $11,000 or $12,000. To that time was a lot of money. And anyhow, Michael Reichgut had tremendous corporate nerve to just say, "Yeah, we're going to spend $80,000 and do this community effort thing, and it's going to light up the world and so forth." We don't know how it works. This guy down here does. Mm-hmm. So I showed it to Bob Makar and his brother Tom. Bob had done an interface on Ohio Scientific or something computers, really strange stuff, and I had talked him into porting it to the Commodore 64, so we would have a product, kind of a sub-Rosa product from Moog Electronics. I only found out later that Luce had told the Regional Planning Commission that lent us all this money we weren't going to be in music again. They didn't want us to be in music. We'd gone out of business being in music. I didn't know that. Anyhow, I showed it to Bob Makar, and I said, well, could we have something in, could we have a series of photos that I could, images that I could do one after the other? He says, oh, I could beat that. He said, we could make a move, and, then Bob and I sat down and rationalized the editor, because if you're going to have something 14 stories tall with 1,600 lights, you got to be able to program it by looking at a little screen. So we sat down and rationalized the editor, and he started writing the code, and little was known about MIDI, and we had to sort of find out some technical stuff. And I said, well, then we showed some of it to the engineering staff, and oddly enough, they said, well, yeah, we could run all of these currents around, through a cable. I said, no, it's like a Christmas tree lights. If one goes out, they'll all go out. I said, no, clearly you don't want to run MIDI or anything outside the building. You want to engage the lights from inside the building. So Bob and I talked about it. He wasn't an engineer, neither was I, but we saw clearly you do MIDI down in the basement, and you have the sequencer and everything, and you send 5-volt pulses up to triacs, I think they call them, and they do zero crossing things, and they turn these lights on. So the only thing you've got exposed, and it's not even really exposed to the weather, is AC, power, the lights, and these cable boxes every now and then to distribute these 5-volt intelligent signals. So that's how the design finally was done. I might say it was extremely robust. We put it up one day, hung the cables, turned it on, ran some of the sequence, made a few adjustments, and it worked perfectly the entire season because it was simple yet powerful. So as Bob and I further rationalized the editor, I began to make requests like, well, could we have something that moves whatever picture we've got left to right or up and down, or in other words, we started doing macros about the images. Now, it was the simplicity itself. There were, I don't know, 8 or 9 music tracks, and there were 4 video tracks. Well, why would we do 4 video tracks if it only took one note to make any image? Turn on any combination of these pixels to make any image. Counterpoint, bars going this way and stars going this way. So, he and I were both musicians, so we thought about the lights the same way we thought about music. You would need some degrees of freedom, counterpoint. So it got made. It got made on time. It got made within budget. The Moog engineering staff did a wonderful job, of designing it. And once we finally got through the argument about, what's going to go out to the lights, and Bob and I just said, no, we don't want MIDI going out there. For one thing, it's a slow protocol. We want 5-volt instantaneous turn-ons to go out there, which we did. And there was that minor rupture where it's like, no, it has to be a Moog product. It can't be a Tom Ray product. And then went back to Michael Reichgut and I said, I'm not going to get rewarded now. I said, I'm going to lose motivation, let me tell you. I said, this is going to be one hell of a job to get this done in the time we have allotted. And I'm just telling you, in easy terms, my motivation is demotivated. He says, I understand completely. He says, what could we do? I said, I don't know. He says, well, we'll need documentation. He said, yeah, you ought to have a manual for other people to write other pieces for it and so forth. He says, well, okay, $12,000 for that. Would you do that? I said, yeah. I'm remotivated. So I went back and told Luce, everything's cool. Let's do the project. I'm going to get rewarded, extra company, and so forth. So it was a huge hit at the Festival of Lights. People came from all over. We hung Moog Synamps, if you remember that big black thing with a crown type amplifiers.
I've got a couple of things.
Oh, I've got one in the basement. We hung them like giant bats from the umbilical that connected the Occidental Chemical Building to the main mall over here, where a lot of the other exhibits were for Festival of Lights. And they were hanging upside down so they wouldn't get speaker cones kicked in by people and, such. Couldn't be reached. Of course, we had to solve the sight versus sound problem. We anticipated that. I said, well, where are people going to be standing? How many meters back are they going to be from the building to see it big enough and to get the full feel, but still to have synchronization between sight and sound? And we built, of course, a delay into the lights because the lights would be instantaneous and the sound would be quite slow, as sound is. Now, my idea, the original idea, when I had the boom, there's the whole idea, was you'd have a low wattage FM radio station to radio the sound. So you could stand a mile or two away at Goat Island or in Niagara Falls. So we're talking about right on the gorge of Niagara Falls. Their building is right there. And so I was thinking of it as the spray and the flume and the snow and all the environmental things, and you could run these pieces and hear the sound in perfect synchrony by standing several miles away. So every piece would change as the environment changed. You could run these pieces every night, but because of environmental differences, they would begin to look different. Never got that. We got instead a light organ, which they insisted on, Occidental insisted on, so they could run Stars on 45, these really terrible disco type sounds, in between the piece that I wrote, which got played 2 or 3 times an hour, something like that. And I had to write this piece the whole time, shepherding this project and getting all of it done. And I wrote an algorithmic section. Tomorrow night we can listen to it. It wasn't exquisite music, but it fit, and the public loved it. I had Christmas carols interspersed with the I Love New York theme and, a little counterpoint. Easy stuff that anybody that knows music can do. And this is what I try to tell my students. I said, look, whether or not you're going to be a great composer is none of my business, basically. That's between you and your maker and, your work and so forth. Whether or not I can teach you how music is put together is definitely my business, and I can do that. I can show you what those forms are that all those Hollywood film composers used, that Brahms used, that Beethoven used, and I can show you how the Beatles did it. I can show you how Radiohead has done it. I can show you how Aphex Twin, because I spent about 1,000 hours developing that course, of going through my own record collection and listening ad nauseum and then excerpting and editing and all that. So I have about 10 hours of examples, of 35, 40 seconds each, of devices of music. And I had actually, it's funny, I knew about certain things about the future when I thought about that project, but they were so far in the future that I had no idea if it was just me or if it was some real thing about the future that I might have found out about. But I saw what could happen at Occidental Chemical very clearly. I knew exactly how we would overcome the technical and the financial problems and so forth. And I'm sorry that it didn't get to be a general instrument where it did have an FM radio station And we could have invited other people to make more sophisticated music, possibly, or I could have written some more sophisticated music. I would have loved to have written something really avant-garde for it as an environmental piece. But it was a big hit. It won the I Love New York Award, etc., and it got into the Guinness Book of World Records. Now, for all of you kiddies out there that are going to do things, let me say right into the camera, you won't get a credit. It is in the Guinness Book of World Records, and it says rather infamously, OxyLights by Occidental Chemical Corporation with music by Moog Music. First of all, the only thing that Occidental did was run the conduit that the AC was in on the outside of the building. Not insubstantial, but pretty pedestrian. We actually strung the lights, did all the design of the 5-volt, the triacs, all the rationalization downstairs with 2 Commodore 64 computers, one of which was essentially running CZ101, a DX7, and 2 RX7 FM synthesizers, and a Yamaha drum machine. And you had to find out things like, the order in which you put the information into these things matters. The DX7 needs to be first. If it goes through these first, it gets rounded off. MIDI does. First, people called it MIDI delay out of total ignorance. It wasn't MIDI delay. It was low-pass filtering, and it rounded off the sharp edges of MIDI as a signal, and it wouldn't function then after that. But we had to learn that. It was so primitive at that era about what anybody knew about MIDI, other than just punters that would plug it in and play it. We actually were trying to do something with it. But it was quite successful. It got into the Guinness Book of World Records. And as far as I'm concerned, Dave Luce knew whose idea it was. He knew whose music it was. He knew who had thought of it. So if it wasn't in Guinness Book of World Records, it's like, yeah, well, what do you expect? And certainly the music was not by Moog Music. The design and the realization of the design was by Moog Music. The music was by me, pure and simple. And then all the color organ things, which the Makars came back, and for another $10,000, we tacked on a little bit, designed the color organ, which Bob did, and then Tom did the patterns so that, it would have these stylized patterns, not infinite degrees kind of a freedom of every pixel like my piece did, but just, okay, there's a color organ. It's more bigger and more colorful than any color organ you've ever seen, and they were happy with that. But it is so true. You do a lot of things. Everybody that's hung around Nashville knows that people come to Nashville and they've got these songs, and some bigwig star, all of a sudden, they're co-writer. They have half of the, to give them a break to put their song on their album, so forth. And nobody was maliciously doing any of this. It's just that's how things come down. So it was OxyLights by Occidental Chemical Corporation or something like that, with music by Moog Music. It wasn't even Moog Electronics, I think.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, it would have been nice if they had mentioned my name. And it's kind of interesting, too. Muriel and I were at this party afterwards. Everybody was jubilant.
It's running out of battery now.
Oh,
Still got tapes.
Anyhow, we went there, and somebody walked up to my wife and said, I know who did OxyLight. I know the man that did OxyLights. And my wife just, playing it said, oh, really, who? And she said, Michael Reichgut. I don't think he'd even claimed that, but, when things are successful, they have many parents. Oh, the story of OxyLights.